Hi everybody, welcome to Dandelion Cottage and Watercolor Wednesday. I'm Leslie Watkins. Today I'm going to be talking about color, just the basics. And I thought what I would do would be to get out my handmade watercolor sketchbook. And if you're interested in learning how you can make your own watercolor sketchbook, I will post the links below and after the video. And I'm going to go to an autumn page. So I've got this spread in the center of my book, and I thought what I would do would be to create a kind of a color wheel. So I've got a couple of circular shapes. I've got a pot lid here, and I thought what I would do would be to simply, and I'm just going to clip this down so it lays a little bit flatter. Okay. And I'm going to lightly trace the outline of the lid. You know, you could use anything. You could use a glass or, you know, whatever, depending on what size paper you're using. And then I'm just going to kind of center this. And I'm sketching very lightly so that you may not even be able to see the lines that I'm making here. But there I've got a kind of a donut shape. And I'm going to use my big brush for this. And I'm going to pull out my watercolor palette. So here it is. So after I've had a session of painting, I'll have some leftover paint on the palette, and oftentimes I'll be able to use that for my next picture. But today, because I'm going to be sharing color mixtures, I'm going to go ahead and give that a good clean. This is just a ceramic tray. You want to make sure that you have a palette that's white so that you can see your mixtures. The watercolor is transparent, so it's the white of the palette that allows you to see what kind of mixtures you're getting, so that when you transfer the paint onto your paper, which is also white or usually an off-white, sometimes called a natural white, you'll be able to have an accurate representation of the color mixture that you've made. So I'm just using a paper towel that I'm dunking in the water. I've got a cup of water off to the side here. I actually have two, one to keep clean and one to rinse my brushes in to wash the paint out of them. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now to activate my paint, I'm just going to give it a little spritz of clean water. On my palette I've got three colors, yellow, red, and blue, and then I have the same yellow in this corner as I do here, but this one looks a little bit greener and this one looks a little bit oranger, simply because I use these yellows to mix the neighboring colors. Using plenty of water, and I'm going to go ahead and give that Another white here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm all set to go. And I'm going to get my paints ready to go. So I'm simply going to moisten each of the colors. I'm adding plenty of water. And you want to do this kind of gently, particularly if you're using a good brush. If you're using a very expensive brush, you may want to use an inexpensive brush for the sake of mixing your colors, so to prevent wear and tear on your brush. The red, yellow, and blue are my primary colors, and I've selected colors that mix beautifully with one another. So I get a very beautiful, brilliant, clean secondary color as well as the beautiful primary colors. Now this I can see has a little bit of red in it, so I want to get rid of that. Give it a quick wipe. And that's all there is to it. I'm kind of cleaning my piles of paint as I go. I recommend that you squeeze out a good amount of paint. Don't put a tiny little pea-sized blob of paint on your palette. That's not enough. Okay, don't be cheap with your paint. You want to have plenty of pigment to be able to achieve the results that that will be convincing. So now I've got 4 nice puddles of paint started. This is just the beginning. And don't worry about your paint drying on the palette. Your paint can be easily reactivated with water, just as I'm doing here. This paint was squeezed out a while back, and it dries in between painting sessions, and that's just fine. Okay, so that's looking pretty good right now. My red's getting into my yellow a little bit here. That's okay. I'll clean that up in just a second. In the meantime, that makes a beautiful orange. You can see on the palette how that's mixing. And I can just pick up some of that pure yellow and put them down here in this corner so it's ready to go. And get the fuzz out of there. There we go. All right, so now I'm ready to start on my color wheel. So I'm going to bring my sketchbook back, and I think what I'm going to do is I'll put a paper towel to protect my page, and I'm going to put my palette right on the book so I can squeeze everything into the camera here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so first thing first, I've rinsed my brush in the dirty water, get rid of all the paint from the brush, and now I'm picking up clean water from my clean water container, and I'm simply going to moisten that circular shape that I just sketched. I'm staying inside of the lines as much as possible. I'm not really too concerned about that. Okay, now as I'm doing this, the water is being absorbed by the paper, and it's getting down into the core of the paper, and it will start to be less wet on the surface and go from a shiny sheen to a little bit duller sheen. And that's, if I hold my head to the side against the light, I can look and I can see that that's exactly what's happening. I'm going to start with my lightest color, and I'm going to put that in this area of the wet. I'm going to drop this painting wet and wet, so I'm dropping full strength color right into that area that I already pre-moistened. And as I'm adding plenty of color here, I can see through what I'm doing, and in effect what I'm doing is I'm glazing over the previously painted spread, and so I can see some of these speckles, and it's helping to add a very charming effect. So the word glazing in watercolor means to add a second layer of color, or third or fourth, whatever the case may be, over an area that's already been painted and allowed to dry. Now I'm going to go to my red, and as I add that, I think you should be able to see that it has a very soft edge. The paint is spreading into the damp area, so the dampness on the paper is pulling that pigment around. I'm going to add a little more water. Make sure this doesn't dry out too much on me while I'm talking. And I'm going to continue to add full strength color here. So the more pigment I add and the less water, the darker. And then over here, I'm going to place my blue. And those are the three primary colors. And they're just sort of mixing around, moving on top of the surface of the paper. This is very wet. Now what I can do is I can go back. I can take my yellow and my red and mix them together and get a beautiful orange, and I can drop that in. And I'm just letting that mingle with the color that's already there. I can do the same thing with my red and my blue. Got a beautiful violet, and this violet is going to be opposite the color wheel from my pure yellow. Adding a little more pigment to make that stronger. And I'm moving fairly quickly to make sure that the paint doesn't have time to dry before I'm done. I'm going to go back into my yellow and blue area, moisten that a little bit more, and now I'm mixing some green, and I'm just clearing my palette. I want to make sure this is a nice clean green. I don't want any red in there, and my red is moving across my palette, so I'm just wiping a little spot away. There's my yellow. My blue. And there's my green. Now I encourage everybody to go ahead and practice these color mixtures, especially when you're trying out new paints, a pigment that you're not familiar with, if you're experimenting. Then go ahead and see how that pigment reacts with the other colors that you have on your palette. And once you become really familiar with these color mixtures, you wouldn't even think about it anymore. It'll just become automatic, and you'll know exactly what you need for whatever it is that you're working on at the moment. Now, what this does is it gives us a lot of information. It tells us that the opposite of yellow is violet, the opposite of red is green, and the opposite of blue is orange. And that's powerful information, because what we can do with that is we can take a blue and an orange and mix it together, and it's going to produce a beautiful gray, and that's going to become very useful as we develop our paintings, and I'll be talking more about that later. But for now, I just wanted to get started with the basic color wheel, share that with you, encourage you to play. And I hope that you can see that with just these 3 colors, you can make all the colors of the rainbow, and you can mix them together to create these beautiful, colorful images. All right, and in future videos, I will be talking more about how you use your mixtures, your complementary colors to produce grays that will help you to depict form, atmosphere, light and shade, all the different things. So this is very important, and it's fun. So I hope you take the time to practice your color wheels. Experiment with your color mixtures. Just play, and I will see you in the next video. Stay well, stay happy, stay creative.